Thank you. It's a delight to be here tonight. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. That quote has become part of the fabric of my life. Why? Because I remember it from 1988. Some of you all weren't even born then. And that was when I stepped out to run for office the first time. And actually, that quote was a part of my first radio spot. And so my journey has been quite an interesting one, but I want to rewind just a little bit because my journey actually started in the windy city of Chicago. Now, the question that I get asked the most is, how did you end up here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana? Well, I'll tell you briefly that my father was born in a little town called Ethel, Louisiana. Anybody ever heard of Ethel, Louisiana? And he was born, I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but he was born in the year 1903. Yeah. As you can probably imagine, he is since deceased. But he was born in 1903. My mother was born in 1912 in a little town in Mississippi called Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Oprah Winfrey put Kosciuszko on the map because that's where she was born. And so they both migrated to the city of Chicago. And for those of you all who have studied history, you know about the Great Migration. Well, both of my parents were part of that. And so I was born in Chicago. And actually, my dad was 53 years old when I was born, and my mother was 44 years old. And so I always like to say that I'm probably considered part of a Abraham-Sarah experience there. But I have to tell you that my parents really sowed the seeds of leadership in my life. They were the first ones. Because my dad really sowed and planted seeds of being fearless. And maybe that was because of his own life experiences. You see, my dad had a laryngectomy. I was 3 months old. And so it was questionable if he would ever speak again after having that laryngectomy. But because he had a 3-month-old daughter that he wanted to communicate with, he went above and beyond to make sure that he learned how to speak again. In fact, he did so well that doctors would use him to encourage other folks who had the same type of operation. And so my dad sowed the seed of being fearless in my life. And then my mom, who was the sweetest mother in the whole wide world, she sowed the seeds of love and compassion and caring for others in my life. And so then there were so many others who sowed seeds in my life. All of the teachers that were part of my life in school, who encouraged me, who saw leadership in me. And then even my Sunday school teacher, and then my mentors that came along the journey. When I was 13 years old, I encountered two individuals who were both studying to be professors at the University of Chicago. And they were about 23 years old. And it was something in them that I saw that I wanted to be. You know, they were both in graduate school, and they were a couple, and they were married, and they had so much going on that I said, you know, why don't you come over to my house for dinner? 13 years old. And so you can imagine they probably thought it strange that a 13-year-old was inviting them over to dinner. But I realized that these two individuals had something that I really wanted. And so I use them as an example of mentors and the value of mentorship and its direct connection to leadership. Now, at some point in each and every one of our lives, we will recognize that call to leadership. In fact, I found a quote by Erica Anderson, an author, and she says that the single most powerful way to grow as a leader is to become truly self-aware. aware. And so I can identify the call to leadership throughout my time in school. You see, it manifested when I was in the 5th grade and I ran for student council, and then that thread continued when I was in high school and I decided to join the forensic team and spent every Saturday in speech and debate, and then running for student government. All of that was part of the manifestation of the leadership seeds in my life. And so I do believe that leadership evolves and it is developed in each and every one of our lives. And so all of that really played a significant role in my life. How many of you all have ever heard of Kit Crawford? How many have ever heard of Cliff Bars? Okay. Well, she is the woman behind Cliff Bars. And in fact, she's one of America's richest self-made women. And she said, leadership is a lot about listening to yourself. Be brave with your decision, even if it goes against the grain. And so in 1988, I listened to my heart, and I decided to go against the grain. And I ran for city council here in Baton Rouge. I had no name recognition. That means nobody knew my name. I had no money. That means I was broke and I had no money. But all I had was that desire and that determination and that call. And so I stepped out with the little credit card that I had, maxed it out at Kinko's, made some flyers. It was very primitive back then, and took my message door to door. Oh, did I tell you I ran against a 12-year incumbent? Yeah, so I really ran against the grain. And so, but the rest is pretty much history, because at the end of the day, it paid off. I won. And so with that, yeah, let's clap for that. I win, you win, we all win. And actually, I've learned over the years, after going to a number of conferences, and I just want to give a shout out to all the men who are here tonight. I appreciate you. More power to you. Thank you for being here. It says a lot about each and every one of you to be here tonight in so many different ways. But after going to a lot of conferences and meetings on women in politics, I've learned that when women run, women win. Statistics show that. And so that's a little caveat I'd like to leave with you tonight. So I can tell you that I never planned on running for one office after another office. I never planned on having, as what many would talk about these days, as having a political career. That was never my desire. I ran for office because I experienced a call to public service. And that was the leadership call as well. And so with that call to public service, all I wanted to do was to do a good job where I was. And so I was so excited to be a Metro Councilwoman. All I could think about is, yes, I'm gonna change the world. I'm gonna change this district. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. So I never thought about the next step. But it's really interesting, as I was sitting there doing my thing, then a number of other people started coming to me and they would say, hey, did you know that there's a seat opening in the House of Representatives? No, had no clue. Because I was working on being a great councilwoman. And so after prayerful consideration, I decided to run for state representative. Was doing a good job there. And then my senator decided that he wanted to run for mayor. How many of you all remember Kip Holden? Yeah. He decided that he wanted to run for mayor, so I ran for his Senate seat. But it all started with that step and stepping out in 1988. And so as I became in the House of Representatives, I became the first woman elected by my peers as Speaker Pro Tem. Now, how did that happen? And this is something very important to remember in leadership. It happened because I built relationships with my colleagues. It didn't matter if they were white, black, Republican, Democrat. I started talking to them. I started building genuine relationships with them. You know, there's an adage that says people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I genuinely started making those connections. And eventually I became the first woman to be Speaker Pro Tem, and then in the Senate, President Pro Tem of the Senate, and the first woman to have that leadership in both the House and the Senate. And so when I took on the task of becoming mayor, I have to tell you, it was a whole nother level. A whole nother level of fortitude in my life, of perseverance, of everything you can possibly think of. And then I remember the words of my mother when I first ran for office in 1988. And one time when I was running for council, and one time I came home because these people were saying so many ugly things about me, you know. That happens in politics. Did you all know that? Yeah, people say ugly things. And so when I was running for the council, people were saying all kind of things about me. And I came home one day and I told my mom, I said, Mom, these people are saying all kind of things about me and it's not true. And she merely said, baby, if you want to be in politics, you're going to have to develop some tough skin. And so I can tell you that I thought about that tough skin when I ran for mayor. And I kept it. I also thought about a poem that I used to recite when I was like in middle school by Kipling. You remember that poem, If you can keep your head when all about you are blaming you or doubting you, if you can make allowance for your own doubting, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting when people are lying about you. That's the paraphrase version. But I started thinking about that poem also. So at the end of the day, I recognized that I am just an ordinary woman on an extraordinary journey. And so the truth is that each and every one of you, whether you are a male or female, can certainly have that same type of leadership journey and experience. But I want to leave a few leadership lessons with you, just 3. Be fearless. Oprah Winfrey once said that the thing you fear most has no power. Your fear of it is what has the power. And then I started thinking about those cartoons when I was growing up. They probably don't have them now. But you remember they used to talk about Fearless Leader? Anybody remember those cartoons? They don't have them now. That was 100 years ago when I was little. There used to be a cartoon and they would talk about the guy and he would be fearless leader. And so we have to be those fearless leaders. Be faith-filled. You've got to believe. For me, my barometer, I have chosen to be a Christian. And so it is my faith that drives me. There are a lot of positive words like be strong, be courageous, you can do it, I can do this, you know. So that helps me a lot. Lastly, be focused. Be focused on the victory line. When I ran for mayor, there were a lot of naysayers. There were constant darts being thrown at me. But the way I navigated through that, certainly by being faith-filled and by being fearless, but by being focused. I was focused on the victory line. So it didn't matter what people were saying to my left. It didn't matter what people were saying to my right. I stayed focused on that victory line. So it is really true. A journey of 1,000 miles does start with that single step. And my encouragement to each and every one of you is to take that step of leadership starting right now. Thank you.